Subaru is a brand which has managed to stay consistently unique through much of its history. Unlike rivals, which have been forced to change up their core range of nameplates and adopt a lot of technology in the process, this brand has managed to stay the same with its signature boxer engine and symmetrical all-wheel drive system across a range of adventure-ready nameplates. But Subaru can no longer ignore the fact that electrification is here to stay. So will this car, its first electric car, the Solterra, be enough to convince its loyal fan base? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Now, you might already know that the Solterra isn't entirely a Subaru. It shares its platform and a lot of its key equipment with Toyota's equivalent BZ4X, and the two cars even look quite similar. While it's not as uniquely Subaru as a Forester or an Outback, sharing with Toyota is not without precedent, as both brands have teamed up before on the 86 and BRZ sports cars. Pricing is key in this segment, but the Subaru's opening salvo started with a surprise price cut just before its launch. Now starting from $69,990 before on-roads, the Solterra is more affordable than the entry-level Kia EV6 and Ford Mustang Mach-E, but it is more expensive than its platform mate, the BZ4X, as well as the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and Tesla Model Y. The real value add for the Solterra though is the fact that it gets all-wheel drive as standard, while at the same price all of those aforementioned rivals are two-wheel drive. The Solterra range is nice and straightforward with just two variants. Both get the same 74.1 kilowatt-hour battery pack and 414 kilometer WLTP driving range, but that's noticeably less than all of those aforementioned two-wheel drive rivals. We'll talk power figures and whether it can offer the capability which Subaru buyers expect later, but when it comes to standard gear, staying true to the brand, the base car still gets all the important stuff. Included are 18-inch alloy wheels, a 12.3-inch multimedia touchscreen and 7-inch instrument panel, cloth interior trim with power adjust for the driver's seat, a heated steering wheel, a power tailgate, LED headlights, a digital rear vision mirror, as well as carpet mats and a cargo tray. You also get the same active safety equipment across the range, but more on that later. What do you get for splashing an extra $7,000 on the top spec Touring? Well, that'd be 20-inch alloy wheels, a 10-speaker Harman Kardon audio system, a wireless phone charger, synthetic leather interior trim, memory seat settings, power adjust for the front passenger, a panoramic sunroof, and an intelligent park assist feature. Options are limited to mainly paint schemes, but there's also the choice to bundle in either a 7 kilowatt or 22 kilowatt home charging wall box. Worth thinking about, but keep in mind the Solterra's maximum AC charging speed is 11 kilowatts. The Solterra doesn't look a whole lot like Subarus which have come before, but it does look a lot like a BZ4X. This is a truly co-developed vehicle, but a big factor behind this new weird coupe SUV look which seems to have emerged recently is keeping those drag coefficient numbers low so manufacturers can maximize driving range. Now, as you can see, the Solterra doesn't quite have the same wagony sort of silhouette as the rest of Subaru's range, but there has been some effort to kind of make it a little bit more Subaru-y, especially in the front here. As you can see, what's changed is a fresh set of headlights, a new kind of frame for the grille piece to associate it with the rest of Subaru's range, and there's also these fog light fittings and this little piece of silver garnish here, which looks a little bit like those that you might find on the Crosstrek or the Forester. Interestingly, Subaru also claims the Solterra has a segment-leading ground clearance, helping it to keep some of that brand cred for going a bit off the beaten track. Next up, let's have a look on the inside. Now, the interior of the Solterra is a little more science fiction than Subaru buyers might be used to. You've got this full-on kind of three-dimensional steering wheel column here and your little screen that's quite far away, and there's some quite nice design touches to the way it's been put together, although I can't imagine it's particularly easy to get the dust out of all the corners of it. Elsewhere, you've got this lovely raised center console, which does help to lift that cabin ambience quite a bit and make it all nice and comfortable in here with places to put your elbows, nice soft touch materials in the doors and on that armrest too. Working your way up here, you do have a landscape-oriented touchscreen instead of the big portrait-oriented one that you'll know from Subarus like the Crosstrek and the Outback. And it is running Toyota software in here as well, which is a pretty common theme. There's a lot of Toyota stuff in here. There's Toyota switchgear here, there's Toyota software on the digital instrument cluster and Toyota software on that main screen there. So it doesn't feel quite like it's entirely a Subaru, and again, that's because it's not entirely a Subaru. There are some other details which I really appreciate as well. These seats are nice and soft and spongy, and there's also a brilliant little design piece of this cloth trim that runs across the dash. I do like that these new materials are making their way into next generation EV products. It's that opportunity to really change up the way an interior is designed. Now on the practicality front, it does feel nice and spacious in here too, and I do feel like I've got plenty of visibility out of this cabin as well. In terms of storage, you've got two nice bottle holders in the door and a further two in this center console here, plenty big enough for this bottle. And if we open up the center console, there's quite a shallow little, almost like a tray underneath there. So it's not huge like it is on some EVs, but it's not bad either. Now that's made up for by the fact that there's a huge pass-through kind of under this console area with plenty of storage for other things, and you've got USB-C outlets there as well. There's also this little flip-up tray design here, and inside there's a wireless charger and your data port. This brings up two small issues for me. The first is the wireless charger has kind of like a gloss plastic finish on it, so your phone can kind of move around inside there in the corners and go outside of that wireless charging area. Also, because your data port is in there, you can't close it and have the cable coming out, which seems like a little bit of a design oversight. Here in the back seat of the Solterra, you'll notice a few things straight away. Firstly, there's plenty of room. I'm 182 centimeters tall. That's behind my own driving position. And as you can see, I've got plenty of knee room in there. There's also plenty of headroom despite the existence of that big sunroof, and it needs somewhere to roll away. So I'm pretty impressed with that too. Although you wouldn't want to be too much taller than me. Elsewhere, we've got some nice storage in the doors, enough room for our bottle here. And if we pull down this armrest as well, there's two more bottle holders in there with a little slot that you might want to put a phone in or something like that. In terms of the center console, we have two adjustable air vents with a lock off. There's two heated seats in the back seats here in this top touring grade, and there are USB-C outlets as well. Now, this brings up something interesting as well because there's no 3-pin household outlet in the back seat or anywhere in this cabin, and that's something that's a bit of a shame because it doesn't make the most of that big high voltage battery under the floor either. Now when it comes to the boot, both Solterra grades get a standard powered tailgate. Inside there's 410 litres of boot space, which is smaller than the Ioniq 5 and Kia EV6, but it is bigger than the Mustang Mach-E, so a little in the middle there. Now there's not a whole lot to see under the bonnet here. In fact, it just looks like an engine. There's no additional storage or frunk or anything under the bonnet of the Solterra. There's a single dual motor powertrain. See those power figures on your screen now. You will note that even though it's all-wheel drive, it has a lot less power than a lot of its all-wheel drive rivals, which are more performance oriented. As already mentioned, 414 kilometers is the driving range regardless of variant, which is perhaps this car's hardest sell as many of its rivals offer closer to 500 kilometers of driving range in their entry-level forms. Charging times are about what we'd hope for, with the Solterra able to juice up at 150 kilowatts on DC or 11 kilowatts on AC. These are fairly standard numbers for this class, allowing a fast charge time of about 30 minutes on a 150 kilowatt or higher DC unit, or 6.5 hours on an 11 kilowatt AC charger. It goes up to 35 hours on a wall socket. For context, the DC charging rate about matches the Mustang Mach-E, although it is a tad slower than what's available on the 800-volt EV6 and Ioniq 5, which can charge larger batteries in a shorter time. One small blow to the Solterra's EV Explorer vibe is the lack of V2L, meaning there's no clever way to power things using the car's battery. A missed opportunity, in my opinion. Now, with all the Toyota bits and pieces in here and how closely this car has been developed with Toyota, you would be forgiven for thinking that it might drive like a Toyota and not genuinely like a Subaru. But there's much more to the story than that. And actually, if anything, I think the Solterra is more Subaru than it is Toyota, and a really good way of translating the qualities of what makes a Subaru into this EV space. Let's start with power. Because 160 kilowatts doesn't sound like a lot when you compare this car with its all-wheel drive rivals. The all-wheel drive EV6 and the all-wheel drive Mustang Mach-E, for example, are significantly more powerful. But the way I see it, Subarus aren't about power to begin with. They're more with how that power is put to the ground. And that's what this car does really well. It's true that it doesn't have that straight line breakneck performance that you might associate with a big EV SUV like this. But actually, it's nice, it's controlled, it's balanced, and it's probably really the right amount of power for an SUV like this, especially if you're not looking for something overtly sporty and you're just looking for something to drive around town in and go for a few adventures in. The next thing is down to the steering. This car has a really nicely balanced steering tune, and that's another typical Subaru trait. It sits nicely in the middle of its rivals. For example, the EV6 and the Ioniq 5 have really electrically assisted steering, which feels a bit artificial. And meanwhile, on the other side of the spectrum, the Mustang Mach-E has heavy performance-oriented steering. This car sits nicely balanced in the middle, and it's even got kind of a nice ratio to it so that you can turn it and have quite a reaction at the front wheels, making it easy to steer around corners. But I think this car's most Subaru trait is its excellent ride quality. This is something that's clearly hard to get right with the additional weight of batteries. Often EVs, even in this class, ride a bit hard or a bit stilted, or they have a tendency to jiggle as the weight of that battery needs to come under control as you hit those bumps. But in this Subaru Solterra, the ride quality is excellent. It soaks up bumps nicely, it tilts into corners nicely, and it deals even with off-road scenarios quite well. We did get a chance to take this car on a curated off-road track, and the performance there was pretty impressive. It did all the same things that an Outback or a Crosstrek could do, although you probably want to be a little more careful in the real world because there's a higher chance that you're going to do more damage puncturing a battery than you are damaging some running gear under a, Outback, for example, which is fairly replaceable. Still, I was impressed with the performance on offer, and the ground clearance, which you'll see on your screen now, is genuinely good. It's almost as good as something like a Crosstrek. So if it's a little bit of adventure potential you're looking for, this car genuinely delivers on that Subaru brand promise. If you are thinking of taking this car a little bit on the rough stuff though, the only thing I would suggest is picking the lower of the two variants, just so you've got a little bit more tire sidewall, because these 20s are a bit precarious. One thing this Subaru does get that I haven't seen on any EV before is a strange kind of cruise control system for going off-road. Now this system gives you a little kind of switch on the dash, and when you activate it, the car will keep its speed across all sorts of terrain, and that's because you have the advantage of a computer-controlled motor. So it will just keep using the traction systems and keep using the torque of the motors and that all-wheel drive system to consistently travel over all sorts of terrain. It's quite clever. I haven't seen something like it before. I'm not sure how much you'll use it in the real world, but I can tell you that it works. So it fits the qualities of a Subaru quite nicely. Balanced ride quality, nice steering, and a little bit of that adventure cred. But how does it behave as an electric car? I think most boxes are actually ticked here. It's got 4 levels of adjustable regenerative braking that you can use these paddles for. It's got a single pedal driving mode, which I really like to use around town. And it seems to have a fairly accurate range prediction on the dash as well. I'd like to have this car for a little longer to really investigate how well that range number is reflected on that dash on a kind of a longer trip. But on the whole, it looks pretty good so far. So who is this car going to suit? Well, I actually think it's going to suit a Subaru buyer really well, because it doesn't have that science fiction appeal of the EV6 or Ioniq 5, and it doesn't have the performance credentials of the Mustang Mach-E. Instead, it offers something really in the middle, something comfortable, something compliant, something family ready, and something with that little bit of adventure cred. So, full marks. I think they've done a great job of making an electric car feel like it suits the rest of the Subaru range. Now, what about safety equipment? Because a lot of modern safety items can be quite annoying. And interestingly, this car doesn't quite get the same eyesight system that appears in the rest of the Subaru range, which we usually quite like. Instead, it seems to have more of the Toyota safety systems than the Subaru ones. But there's nothing wrong with that. The Toyota systems seem to work really nicely. I don't find that too many of the systems are beeping at me too often. The lane keep doesn't intervene unless it really has to. So, on the whole, not bad when it comes to the active safety features, and this car really does get the whole suite of active safety features, so make sure to check out the full review over at carsguide.com.au to check those out. Now, just in time for the Solterra's launch, this car achieved a maximum 5-star ANCAP safety rating to the most stringent current standards, so quite impressive there. It's the usual Subaru 5-year and unlimited kilometre warranty and 5 years of roadside assist this time around, although the Solterra gets an additional and industry standard 8-year and 160,000 kilometre warranty for its high voltage battery pack. And get this, servicing is free for the first 5 years. Subaru really wants you to buy one of these cars that much. This specific electric midsize space has become increasingly busy in recent years, and it's become more difficult to stand out from the crowd. Subaru has addressed this issue by doing what it has always done best, and that's offering ready-for-adventure credentials at a relatively affordable price point. But it doesn't come without a cost. This EV doesn't bring the price down for this category of car, and nor does it offer a particularly stellar driving range, which is what many first-time EV adopters are after. So Subaru is leaning on these credentials to sell this car to its existing loyal customer base. What do you think? Would you pick one of these over a Kia EV6 or Hyundai Ioniq 5? Tell us in the comments below, and make sure to check out our full written review over at carsguide.com.au.